Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.
I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? It's Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners. And week 18, the first week 18 ever in the NFL, is getting set to kick off. And for those of you that are still playing in week 18 championships, we're still here for you. All right. I know it's not the best situation in the world. Luckily, this year, almost all the teams are really still playing for something that are locked into spots right now. Yes, they may have made the playoffs, but their seeding isn't really played out yet, so they're still going to be throwing all their starters out there. The one team we're worrying about this week is Green Bay. Green Bay locked into that number 1 seed. They're going to have it throughout the entirety of the playoffs, but everybody else still kind of battling for position right now. So you may not have to worry too much about starters sitting this year, but next year, have a chat with your league manager, with your commish, whatever you call them, and just say, hey, no week 18. Okay, let's finish this thing off in week 17. So for those of you that might be checking this out that won last week, congratulations. For those of you that have another championship sitting here in front of you, let's get it, baby. And we're going to kick things off with the, well, not Thursday night game. There's no Thursday night football this week, but there are 2 games on Saturday. And the first game on Saturday this week, Kansas City at Denver in the afternoon. In Kansas City, Travis Kelce, yes. Obviously, we're going to be starting Travis Kelce, even against a Denver team that has allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. Over the last 4 weeks, Travis Kelce is going to be a start for us. Now, maybe a little bit less upside. Maybe we're only talking about 4 catches, 70 yards or something like that. But touchdown upside is still there this week, so we are going to be rolling him out as always. And then for Denver last week, kind of called that Noah Fant game, right? If you were listening last week, you heard how much I liked Noah Fant last week. He ended up coming up big for the Denver Broncos, but I'm not really going to be expecting it this week. KC allows the 9th fewest fantasy points per tight end over the last 4 weeks, playing a little bit better against them. I just don't see it this week. I don't see it with Fant or Albert. Are you okay? If you have to play Fant, wouldn't be the worst option in the world because KC still is, going to be a high-scoring team. They're going to have to throw it to keep up with KC. So you could have worse options than Fant, but for me, in championship week, I'm just wanting to look for somebody that's been a little bit more consistent with upside this season. Dallas of Philadelphia on Saturday is going to bring my Manscaped must-watch matchup here at the tight end position. Don't forget, if you head over to manscaped.com and use our code word headliners at checkout, you're going to get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. Manscaped.com. Go get yourself a few goodies right now. At the tight end position for Dallas, Dalton Schultz is a start for me this week. Philadelphia is allowing the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. There's going to be no Gallup in years past. This past year, last year, when there was no Michael Gallup, Dalton Schultz really, or the tight end position even, really seemed to have a grasp on those kind of extra targets that were left over. Now for Philadelphia with Dallas Goedert, he's really the only guy on the team right now performing consistently as a ball catcher. I mean, getting a decent amount of targets on a consistent basis. Yeah, a few down games here or there, but really you can lock him in for anywhere from about 5 to 7 targets, and the yards have been coming with those targets as well. So Dallas Goedert, maybe not the highest upside in the world, but a very, very safe tight end right now. Cincinnati at Cleveland's not going to have a whole lot. Now, all the tight ends in this matchup have had no consistency and no upside all season long. CJ Uzomah for a 2-game stretch was playing really, really well, but the wide receivers are getting so many targets right now that there's just nothing left for CJ Who's Your Mama, because then you have to also throw in Joe Mixon and his targets per game. For Cleveland, Austin Hooper, David Njoku, Harrison Bryant, all 3 of those guys. Every once in a while, they're going to get a score, like David Njoku, Monday Night Football. He ended up getting a score. So they're going to get scores every once in a while. They are some very talented tight ends, but there's not going to be any Baker Mayfield this week. And again, it's just the game plan doesn't really call for it. The game plan, the game flow, nothing really has them throwing to the tight end. Maybe we see Austin Hooper with a little bit extra this week going with the backup quarterback, Case Keenum. I highly doubt it, though. I'm just going to stick away from the entire matchup. Green Bay at Detroit's going to be another matchup that I'm just staying away from at the tight end position. Listen, Mercedes Lewis, no, right? We're not going with Mercedes Lewis. For Detroit, Brock Wright, no, we're not going. We're not doing anything with the tight end position in this matchup. We'll keep an eye on the wide receivers, the running backs, the quarterbacks, everything. Tight end's not going to matter this week, though. Chicago at Minnesota, and I wish that this was a much better option, but I can't do it this week. Cole Kmet, when Justin Fields plays, he's a start. When Justin Fields doesn't play, he's not a start. Just nobody outside of Fields has targeted Cole Kmet this year on a consistent basis. Would love to see Justin Fields back out there so they could target him on a consistent basis. Now, for the Minnesota Vikings, Tyler Conklin. All right. You twisted my arm enough. I'll list Tyler Conklin as a start this week. Conklin did see 9 targets last week, and given that it was a backup quarterback, not bad. But if Kirk Cousins comes back this week, that's where things kind of get a little bit dicey. Okay, what are we really going to be getting from Conklin with with Kirk Cousins back this week? Last week with Mannion, he looked at him quite a bit. Cousins hasn't been as consistent with the targets going over to Conklin as we would like this year. Now, here's the thing. Lots of you might be looking, if you're playing this week, looking at potentially KJ Osborne, Tyler Conklin. One of these two, you might be saying, who's going to... For me, KJ Osborne has a little bit more touchdown upside this week, but also a little bit tougher matchup with the Bears. Whereas Tyler Conklin, touchdown upside isn't nearly as there, because when you get down into the red zone and things tighten up a little bit, that Chicago Bears defense is a little bit good with the tight end, or a little bit better with the tight ends, keeping them out of the end zone. However, it's the volume from there, because they do such a good job of locking down wide receivers. Every once in a while, some tight ends are going to slip out and kind of get away. That's where Tyler Conklin could help this week. So volume-wise, not bad. Touchdown upside, not there. Washington and the New York Giants. And for Washington, John Bates will be a start for me. The New York Giants have allowed 15 fantasy points per game over the last 4 weeks to opposing tight ends, just outside of the top 10 for most allowed. So lately, they've been allowing a little bit more to the tight end. So John Bates this week with no Ricky Seals Jr., no Logan Thomas, obviously kind of a carousel at the wide receiver position this season. He could end up seeing a few targets. I think he could see about 6 targets this week. If he catches all of them, should give him 8 fantasy points. Now, on the flip side, though, for the New York Giants, they had all of 24 passing yards last week. Now, I will say this. Evan Ingram had 50% of them. He had 12 receiving yards last week. Oh, man. I'm not going to trust it this week, though. I'm not interested in starting any New York Giant now or for the foreseeable future. Indianapolis at Jacksonville, another matchup where there's just not a whole lot to take a look at. Jack Doyle and Mo Alley-Cox, neither of them on a consistent basis. This week, I'm not looking for those high touchdown upside plays. I'm looking for guys that I know are going to get me a few points, okay? That's what I want here in Week 18. And then kind of the same thing on the flip side with Jacksonville. There's just nobody on that team that's been consistent enough for me to even be considering them this week. All right, now here's a much better matchup. Pittsburgh at Baltimore is going to bring 2 of the better young tight ends in the game. The rookie, Pat Freiermuth, kind of making his mark this year. And, rookie tight ends, it's very tough for them to produce, but he's done a pretty decent job of it this year. Really expect him to be much more involved in the passing game next year, depending on who the quarterback is. And this week, going up against Baltimore, maybe a little bit more touchdown upside than volume, just because the volume is a little bit hit or miss right now with the way Ben Roethlisberger has been playing. 24 completions for only 100 and something yards last week. So he's not really, he's not completing a whole lot down the field. It's tightening things up for this offense a little bit. But with Pat Freiermuth, if they can get down to the red zone, definitely a big option to score. And then for Mark Andrews, the Steelers do allow less than 10 fantasy points per game to tight end, but we're not sitting Andrews. It doesn't matter. The dude is balling out. You continue to play him. Tennessee at Houston, another wasteland matchup of tight end options. We're not considering anything here. And for Fursker and Swaim, both of them scored last week. Slow clap. Good for them. No one cares. Nobody cares. No one cares. No one started you last week, and we're definitely not starting you this week. And for Houston, there's no options to start here either. Now, hopefully Brevin Jordan takes a step forward next year. That's something I'm excited for. Definitely not excited for it in Week 18 of 2022, though. New Orleans at Atlanta, and there's really only one decent option here, and that's going to be for the Atlanta Falcons, and that is Kyle Pitts. Now, the yards continue to be there for Kyle Pitts, the most receiving yards by a rookie tight end ever, but That's basically been it. 1 touchdown on the season. If this dude just would have scored 5-6 touchdowns, he would have been such a better fantasy contributor this year. But basically every single week, you were hoping for the upside that never was realistically there. And we'll talk about that more this offseason with Kyle Pitts. But he just had so much hype going into the season that people's expectations were here when Kyle Pitts actually performed here. So it made everybody mad because he was here and not here, but in reality, everybody else was down here. So, I mean, Kyle Pitts, not a great season by any means. Not a bad season, though, at all. So definitely going to be starting him week 18. Got to roll with it. The New York Jets at the Buffalo Bills. Nobody from New York that we're going to be taking a look at, but for Buffalo, yeah, we'll be keeping Dawson Knox in the lineup. Now, hopefully he bounces back from that 2-target, no reception performance that he had last week. Let a lot of people down. It was very unfortunate for him to have his worst performance of the season in championship week. But for those of you that own him that play for a championship this week, hopefully he can redeem himself because we are going to be throwing him back out there. San Francisco at the LA Rams, and George Kittle, kind of another tight end that had a little bit of a letdown performance last week. But for those of you that own him, we are bouncing back. But the Rams are going to be a little bit of a tougher matchup than what Houston was last week. So it's unfortunate that he had a bad matchup last week, and now he goes into a tougher matchup as well. We'll see what kind of happens on the coverage side of things. I definitely think George Kittle could see a little Jalen Ramsey, maybe not nearly as much as we saw last week with Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews still performed well last week. But the one thing, too, about that's kind of a difference between San Francisco this week and Baltimore last week is that San Francisco, if Trey Lance is the quarterback again, he's got a little bit better of an ability to push the ball down the field. So hopefully that keeps things spread out, which will help George Kittle. Now, for the LA Rams, Tyler Higbee, I mean, he hasn't been an option for us in quite a while. He sees a decent amount of targets, but they really don't turn into a whole lot of production. New England at Miami, and we are going to go with Hunter Henry as a start this week, and I think he finds the end zone. I think that this is going to be a week where we see New England probably, control the ball a little bit more. Not a bunch of huge plays or anything like that, but really control the ball, getting into the red zone as much as possible. Then I think from there, Hunter Henry, that's where he kind of helps out. So even though he might only have a week where he sees 3, maybe 4 catches, 30, maybe 40 yards, somewhere in that area, I think a touchdown is really what is going to be able to make his week this season. And then for Miami, I mean, Mike Gesicki, I'm just not trusting it. I mean, New England's been way too good against tight ends this year, and they've been really good against wide receivers as well, but they've been way too good against tight ends. Mike Gesicki hasn't been consistent enough, and Tua just doesn't look his way enough. Seattle at Arizona, and I'm going to sit Gerald Everett this week. Arizona allows the second fewest fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, and part of that reason is because Isaiah Simmons is so darn good. He's out there. He's a guy who can play linebacker, can play safety, he can play in the slot, he can do everything. He can cover, he can attack the quarterback, and part of the reason they do so good against tight ends is because he's able to really cover any of the better tight ends in the league. Now for Arizona, going to go with Zach Ertz as a start this week. We're definitely looking at a team in Seattle that has allowed the second most fantasy points per game to tight ends over the last 4 weeks. Obviously, with having no DeAndre Hopkins, Zach Ertz has kind of jumped into that like 2B, 2A, 2B type of target on this team lately, which has been really good for him, and hopefully he has a great performance this week. Carolina at Tampa Bay. We're not going with anyone from Carolina, even though Ian Thomas led the team in receiving yards last week. Nope, not going to trust him here in week 18. Just not going to happen. And then for Rob Gronkowski, no more Antonio Brown. He's out the door. Chris Godwin hurt, done for the year. Leonard Fournette obviously not playing in week 18. So no targets going to those 3, which means more targets for Mike Evans, more targets for Rob Gronkowski, and he gets to do it against a Carolina defense that has been a little bit on the better side defensively this year. It's going to make for some tougher matchups for some of these younger wide receivers that are going to have to step in, giving the veteran with the connection to Brady the best opportunity to have a big day. The Chargers at Las Vegas will wrap up week 18 in the regular season on Sunday Night Football. And for the Los Angeles Chargers, we're going to sit Steven Anderson. Not really sure what's going to happen with Jared Cook or Donald Parham this week. Anderson's the only one that I'm even aware of that could potentially play, but it doesn't matter because I'm not going to start any of them. And then for Las Vegas, I do have Foster Moreau as a sit right now. However, they are saying that there is a possibility that Darren Waller can get back for the final game of the season. If Waller plays, I start Waller. If Waller doesn't play, I sit Moreau. I mean, I'm not playing Moreau regardless of what happens, but if Waller comes back, I'm 100% going to be trying to get Waller into my lineup this week. Yeah, might be rushing him back a little bit, but I also know that if it was really like detrimental to the success of the team, they wouldn't risk it. They would wait another week and hopefully make the playoffs, but they are pushing towards the playoffs. So even if he's out there, maybe it's a little bit more of a decoy, but the Chargers have been bad at times against the tight end position, so I'm willing to risk it and go with that matchup. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, my tight end start and sit analysis for week 18 of the NFL season. Make sure you do me a favor. Hit that comment, or excuse me, hit the like button down below. Leave a comment. Who do you think is the top scoring tight end this week? And then also, if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners, make sure you hit that subscribe button and stick around for all the great off-season content. Appreciate everybody tuning into this video. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.